The hands of the clock don't lie. They move whether you're watching or not, steady and merciless, measuring every betrayal and every silence. I used to think I had more time. Time with my son, with my granddaughter, with this house that still smells of oil and cedar shavings from my workshop downstairs. But lately, I've learned something hard. When people close to you decide they're done waiting, they'll try to push your hour forward, whether you're ready or not. I never wanted to be the kind of man who spoke of his family as strangers. But these days, when I look at my son Daniel across the dinner table, I see less of the boy who used to sit on a stool in my shop watching me polish gears, and more of a man with an agenda I can't quite hear out loud. He's careful with his words, too careful. His wife, Claire, is less subtle. She drops her hints like pennies into a jar, loud enough for me to hear them rattle. "Dad, the house is big." "Too big," Daniel says, pretending it's just a casual observation as he slices into his chicken. "Boston winters aren't easy at your age," Claire adds, not looking up from her glass of wine. I nod, play the old man, the polite one who lets comments drift past like a clock's second hand. My granddaughter, Lily, sits beside them, pushing peas around her plate. She's 14, already taller than I ever was, but her eyes betray something the others don't have: doubt. She glances at me sometimes as though she knows more than she should, as though she senses a game being played around her that she hasn't yet learned the rules to. I've lived in this house on Ashmont Hill for 47 years, built every shelf with my own hands, painted every wall. Downstairs, in the basement workshop, I've repaired watches for half the neighborhood. People brought me everything from heirloom pocket watches to $20 wristwatches from Walgreens, and I treated each one like it was precious. That's the funny thing about time. Once it stops for you, it doesn't matter whether your watch cost a fortune or a few bucks. You just want it ticking again. I can still hear the voices of my old customers if I close my eyes. Mrs. Driscoll, who always smelled faintly of lavender, pressing her husband's pocket watch into my hands after he died, whispering, "Please, make it work again. I just need to hear it." Or Johnny O'Connor, dropping off his father's broken Timex with a grin, saying, "You're the only one who can coax it back to life." Those people are gone now. The shop is quiet, but their watches are still in my drawers, ticking or waiting to tick. Daniel doesn't see value in any of it. To him, the workshop is a fire hazard, a mess of brass gears and wooden cases. Junk, he calls it, when he thinks I can't hear. He talks about downsizing, about making things easier for me. What he really means is easier for him. Claire is bolder. "You know, Richard," she said last week, "there's a new retirement community opening in Brookline. They've got tennis courts, art classes, on-site medical care. You'd be around people your own age. Doesn't that sound nice?" I smiled, sipped my tea, and said, "I already have art classes, the kind with tiny screwdrivers." They laughed politely, but their eyes said something else. Here's the truth I haven't told them. They're right about one thing. I am getting older. My knees complain when I climb the stairs. Some mornings my hands tremble before they steady on a watch spring. I'm not blind to it. But weakness is not the same thing as surrender. That's what they don't understand. Because while they've been whispering, planning, and waiting for me to step aside, I've been working in my shop late at night, making sure that when their hour strikes, it won't chime the way they expect. Lily came down one evening after her parents had gone to bed. I was hunched over a grandfather clock, oiling its escapement. She lingered by the door, hesitant, like she was intruding on something sacred. "Grandpa?" she whispered. "Yes, Sweetheart, are you gonna leave, like Mom keeps saying? I set down my tools and looked at her. 14, but already carrying the weight of adult worries. That wasn't right. Do I look like I'm packing my bags? I asked, smiling. She shook her head. I don't want you to. Good. Because I'm not. Her shoulders relaxed, and she came closer, tracing her finger along the ornate wood of the clock. They don't get it, she murmured. This place is you. Children understand truths adults bury. She was right. This house, this shop, these clocks, they are me. Every tick is a piece of my life's work. And I'll be damned if I let anyone strip that away like old wallpaper. Later that night, when the house was quiet, I walked through the workshop with a lantern. Shadows of pendulums swung across the walls like patient guardians. I opened the tall cabinet in the corner, the one nobody but me ever touches, and checked the boxes stacked neatly inside. Some were filled with ledgers, receipts, and records from decades of work. Some with things more private, letters, savings, deeds, paperwork that Daniel doesn't even know exists. Every clock has a hidden spring, something small and invisible that makes the whole machine run. My life has hidden springs too. And while Daniel and Claire think I'm winding down, I've been winding something else up. Time is on my side. They just don't know it yet. And if you've stayed with me this far, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop your city in the comments. It's always good to know how far a story travels. And if this tale reminds you of someone in your own family, tap the like button and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. We've only just begun, and believe me, the hour hand hasn't even reached the truth yet. The next morning started with the familiar ache in my knees. I told myself it was just the rain in the forecast. Boston's air has a way of creeping into your joints. I shuffled into the kitchen, brewed coffee, and watched condensation bead along the window pane. For a few minutes, it was just me and the steady drip from the coffee maker. Peace, the kind that feels earned. Then came the voices. Daniel's car pulled into the driveway just as I sat down with my mug. He never used to drop by unannounced. These days, it's every other day. Always with that same rehearsed concern. Always pretending he's just checking in, like I'm a leaky faucet he needs to keep an eye on. He walked in without knocking. That used to bother me, but lately I've been letting him. Let him think I don't notice the small trespasses. It keeps him confident, sloppy. "Morning, Dad," he said, shrugging off his coat. "How'd you sleep?" "Like an old man," I replied, which made him chuckle the way people do when they're not sure if you're joking. He busied himself with the kettle, as if he lived here, as if this was already his house. Then came the line I knew was waiting. Claire and I were talking. We think it's time to start looking at places. Assisted living, maybe just an apartment closer to us. Smaller, easier to manage. He said it kindly, almost tenderly, but it was the tenderness of a butcher petting the cow before the knife. I sipped my coffee and let the silence stretch, let him get uncomfortable. Finally, I said, "Daniel, do you remember when you were 12 and you begged me to let you fix the mantel clock in the living room?" He frowned, caught off guard. Yeah, I think so. You forced the gear in backward and stripped the teeth. I spent 3 days repairing what you did in 3 minutes. He shifted, uneasy. "Dad, what's your point?" "My point is, you don't move a clock until you know how its springs are set. Otherwise, you break it." His mouth twitched, but he didn't answer. I'd learned long ago that Daniel hated parables. He liked things spelled out. but I wasn't about to spell this out for him. Later that week, Claire came alone. She never used to visit me without Daniel. She breezed into the house in her heels, perfume hanging in the air like a cloud. She glanced at the workshop door in the hallway with that same distaste she always carried. "I've booked a tour for you," she announced, not even bothering with small talk. "A tour of Rosewood Village. It's beautiful. They've got everything. Fitness centers, dining halls, even a woodworking shop. You'll love it." I leaned against the counter, watching her like I'd watch a clock that was running a little too fast. Did I say I wanted to leave? "No, Richard, but then why book a tour?" She bristled, then softened her tone, as if I were a stubborn child. "We just want what's best for you. Best for me." Those words always carry a price. I didn't argue. Arguments give them ground. Instead, I nodded slowly, as though I were considering it, while inside my chest, the gears clicked into place. That night, I went to the workshop. The shop smelled of brass dust and oil, the way it always did. Dozens of clocks lined the walls. Grandfather clocks with mahogany cases, delicate carriage clocks, bulky alarm clocks. Some ticked in perfect rhythm. Others waited silently for attention. The sound was uneven, like a room full of people breathing at different tempos. I unlocked the tall cabinet in the corner and pulled out a ledger. The handwriting inside was mine, stretching back 30 years. Purchases, repairs, sales, thousands of entries. But tucked between the pages were things my son didn't know existed. Documents from the credit union, a second savings account in my name, certificates, even a life insurance policy I never told him about. The workshop wasn't clutter. It was my vault, my fortress. Every drawer, every tin box, every clock case hid something worth more than the house itself. And then there were the envelopes. I pulled one out, heavy with folded pages, letters I'd written over the last few months, addressed to Lily. She didn't know about them yet. Each one was a story, a lesson, a memory. Each one contained a truth I wasn't ready to say aloud in front of Daniel and Claire. One day, she'd read them all. One day, when the time was right. 2 days later, Daniel came with Claire and Lily. It was a Sunday, and the kitchen filled with the smell of lasagna. Claire set the table as though she owned the place, while Daniel opened drawers, pretending to look for serving spoons. "Dad," Daniel said casually, "how much do you think the house is worth these days?" There it was, the mask slipping. "More than your patience," I replied. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. At dinner, Lily barely touched her food. She kept glancing at me, then at her parents. Finally, when Claire went to pour wine and Daniel stepped out to take a call, she leaned across the table and whispered, "Grandpa, they're serious. They've been talking about selling." My fork froze in midair. She was 14, and they were already dragging her into their schemes. My heart ached for her. "What do you think about that, Lily?" I asked quietly. Her eyes filled with tears. "I think it's wrong." I reached across and squeezed her hand. "Then hold on to that. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." She nodded, lips trembling. That night, after they left, I sat alone in the workshop, listening to the uneven chorus of clocks. Tick, tock, tick. A few were out of sync, their pendulums swinging stubbornly against the rhythm. I thought of Daniel's hand on my doorknob, Claire's perfume in my hall, Lily's whispered warning. They thought I was old and slow, a man out of time. But the truth is, every clock has a regulator, a tiny lever, almost invisible, that controls its pace. Move it a fraction, and the whole rhythm changes. I was that regulator, They just hadn't realized it yet. So I picked up my pen and began writing another letter to Lily. This one I started differently. If you are reading this, it means the clocks have finally struck the hour I've been waiting for. Boston wakes up differently than it sleeps. At night, the city hums with neon and the low thrum of trains underground. But in the morning, it exhales steam from manhole covers and rattles awake like an old furnace. I stood at my front steps with my coat buttoned high, watching the fog lift over Ashmont Hill, and thought, the world keeps time whether you want it to or not. Daniel called me before breakfast. That's unusual. He's not a morning caller. His voice was too cheerful, too forced. Dad, good news. Claire and I set up an appointment for you this Friday. Just a tour. Nothing binding. I let him talk. His words clinked into my ear like coins into a machine. Finally, I said, Friday, you say? Yeah, noon, Brookline. We'll pick you up. All right, I said simply, and hung up. He probably took my quick agreement as surrender. But surrender is a show, like pulling back the pendulum of a clock before it springs forward. After the call, I went downstairs. The workshop greeted me with the smell of brass polish and old wood. Dust floated in the angled sunlight like snow. I sat at the bench and wound a clock I'd been working on for months, a French mantel clock with a chipped face and a stubborn escapement. The trick with clocks is patience. They don't obey brute force. They bend to steady hands, careful adjustments. I've been applying the same patience to my family. I opened my ledger and flipped to a page near the back. There, scrawled in my uneven handwriting, were names of people who still owed me favors. Small things from decades past, like Mr. Hathaway, the banker who'd entrusted me with his father's pocket watch, or Mrs. Alvarez, who worked at the clerk's office and once needed a rush repair for her anniversary gift. People don't forget when you've restored something they thought was lost. I circled a few names. Then I picked up the phone. The first call was to Hathaway. His voice was older now, gravelly, but he remembered me instantly. Richard? My God, I thought you'd retired years ago. I tried, I said with a smile in my voice. Listen, I've got a favor to ask. Quietly. We spoke for 15 minutes. By the end, I knew I wasn't as powerless as Daniel wanted me to think. The second call was to Mrs. Alvarez. She still worked part-time at the city clerk's office. Clocks may stop, Richard, she said warmly, but you never do. What can I help with? By noon, I'd set 3 small wheels in motion. Nothing visible yet, not to Daniel or Claire, but like the hidden gears inside a case, they'd soon move the bigger hands. That evening, Lily came by. Alone. She said she was walking the dog, but I knew she'd made an excuse. She slipped inside, cheeks red from the cold. Grandpa, they're serious, she blurted before I could even take her coat. I heard Mom on the phone with someone. She said something about getting the house appraised. I felt my stomach tighten. Not from fear. Fear had already burned out of me weeks ago, but from anger. Appraised, huh? I muttered. Yeah, she thinks you'll just go along with it. Dad, too. I guided her down to the workshop. She'd been here a dozen times, but tonight I wanted her to see it differently. The room glowed with lamplight, clocks ticking in a dozen cadences. Lily, I said, resting my hand on the mantel clock, do you know what these are? She smiled faintly. Clocks. Not just clocks. These are timekeepers. They don't argue. They don't flatter. They don't lie. They only tell you the truth of the moment. She nodded slowly, eyes scanning the shelves. Your parents think I'm out of time, I continued. But what they don't understand is that I've been keeping time longer than they've been alive. and I know exactly when to strike." She looked both scared and comforted. "What are you gonna do?" I leaned close and whispered, "I've already started." Friday came. Daniel and Claire arrived right on schedule, bright and false as salesmen. Claire wore her professional smile, the one she used at PTA meetings. Daniel clapped me on the back like we were teammates. "You ready, Dad?" he asked. I slipped into my coat. "I suppose." We drove to Brookline in silence, city streets passing by like scenes in a play. They chattered a bit, about traffic, about Lily's grades, but I kept my gaze fixed out the window. Rosewood Village was exactly what I expected. A polished cage. Bright hallways that smelled faintly of bleach. Cheerful staff with rehearsed greetings. Rooms decorated like catalog pages. Independent living, they called it. But I saw the locks on the doors, the cameras in the corners. Daniel walked me through like he was my handler. Claire pointed out the amenities as though reading from a brochure. "Doesn't this look nice?" she said, showing me the common room with its gas fireplace. "Nice," I echoed, but my voice was flat. When the tour ended, the director handed me a folder full of glossy pamphlets. I thanked her politely, then folded it under my arm like a man humoring a child. In the car, Daniel said, "So, what do you think?" I looked at him, let the silence stretch. Then, "I think you should have asked me before making the appointment." The smile slipped from his face. For a moment, his eyes hardened. Then he laughed it off. "We just want what's best." Best for me. Again, with those words. They tasted bitter in my mouth. That night, back in my workshop, I pulled a small tin box from the cabinet. Inside were keys, not for clocks, though I had plenty of those, but for something else. A storage unit on the edge of Dorchester where I'd been keeping certain things for years. Not even Lily knew about it. I held the keys in my hand, feeling the cool metal press into my palm. The unit held more than old tools. It held proof, evidence, assets that no amount of appraisal could erase. I whispered into the quiet room, "The hour is coming." And all around me, the clocks agreed. The thing about clocks is that they don't wait for you to be ready. They just keep ticking. My son and his wife must have taken notes from them, because after that little tour of Rosewood Village, they didn't waste any time. 3 days later, I came home from the hardware store to find Daniel and Claire in my living room, folders spread across the coffee table like vultures laying out their feathers. Claire straightened when I entered. "Richard," she said in that careful tone people use when they're about to slip a knife between your ribs, "we've scheduled a meeting with a realtor. Just exploratory." "Exploratory," I repeated, setting my bag on the counter. "Yes," Daniel chimed in. "She's going to give us an idea of the market, what the house could be worth. No commitments, just numbers." I looked at the papers. Contracts, disclosure forms, checklists. This wasn't exploratory. This was a marching order. "Do I live here?" I asked flatly. Daniel blinked. "Of course, Dad. But then why are there papers on my table with someone else's name at the top?" Claire's smile tightened. "We just want to be proactive. You've always said planning ahead is important." I didn't answer. I just stood there, letting the silence turn heavy. Eventually, Daniel gathered the papers, muttering something about coming back another time. But as they left, I saw Claire's eyes cut toward me, sharp and cold. She wasn't backing down. Neither was I. That night, I drove out to Dorchester. The air was sharp, cold enough to bite your ears, and the streets were slick with black ice. The storage facility stood at the edge of an industrial strip, chain-link fences and floodlights casting long shadows. Unit 317. I'd rented it under a name only I knew, paid in cash for years. I slid the key into the lock, my hands trembling, not from age this time, but from anticipation. Inside, the air smelled of dust and engine oil. Boxes were stacked neatly, each labeled in my careful script. I pulled one down and pried it open. Inside were ledgers, bank statements, certificates, proof of savings I'd kept separate. Another box held tools, old precision instruments, magnifiers, even a safe I'd bought years ago and tucked away. And then there was the chest. Heavy oak, iron corners. I ran my hand over its lid before lifting it open. Inside were envelopes, sealed, dated. Letters to Lily, letters to Daniel, even one to Claire, though hers was shorter, sharper. And beneath the letters, a small stack of deeds. Not to this house, but to 2 rental properties I'd bought quietly in the 90s, back when repairs were steady and money was good. Daniel had no idea. I stood there in that dim light, surrounded by proof of a life bigger than they imagined, and I almost laughed. They thought I was an old man drifting toward a retirement home. They didn't realize I had been setting springs in place for decades. Lily came by the next afternoon after school. She still wore her backpack, scarf crooked around her neck. Her eyes darted toward the kitchen where Claire had been just the night before, and she whispered, "Did they show you the papers?" "They showed me," I said. "What are you going to do?" I led her downstairs. She perched on a stool, watching me oil a clock. I spoke without looking up. "You ever see the inside of a clock, Lily?" "Not really." I opened the back of a tall clock and let her peer in. Gears, springs, levers all work together in silence. "This is how it works. Every part has its role, and if one part refuses to move, the whole thing stops." She looked at me, eyes wide. "So, you're the part?" I smiled. "I'm the regulator. They don't know that yet." I told her about the storage unit, about the boxes, the deeds, the letters. I didn't tell her everything. Some things are too heavy for a 14-year-old, but I told her enough to make her eyes light up with hope. "Grandpa, that's amazing," she whispered. "They can't just push you out." "No," I said quietly. "They can't, but they'll try. And when they do, you'll see what happens." Sunday dinner was tense. Claire brought salad. Daniel carved roast chicken. They spoke like everything was normal, like we hadn't had that confrontation days before. But the air buzzed with unspoken things. Halfway through the meal, Daniel cleared his throat. "Dad, the realtor's coming by Tuesday, just for a walkthrough." I set my fork down slowly. "A walkthrough?" "Yes, she just needs to see the house, take some notes, no pressure." Lily glanced at me, her fork frozen in her hand. I leaned back in my chair. "You're very efficient," I said. "Almost like you've been planning this a long time." Daniel flushed. "We're just trying to be responsible." "Responsible," I echoed. "Well, then I suppose I should be responsible too." He frowned. "What do you mean?" I smiled, but didn't answer. Let him stew. That night, I returned to the storage unit. This time, I loaded the chest into the trunk of my car. It was heavy, but I managed. When I got it home, I hauled it down to the workshop and slid it into the cabinet. The clocks ticked around me, steady and loyal. I unlocked the chest, pulled out one of the letters I'd written for Lily, and sealed it again with wax. I placed it inside an old clock case, the kind nobody ever touches. Someday, if things went badly, she would find it there. And for Daniel and Claire? Well, they were about to learn that you don't strip the teeth of a gear without consequences. The next morning, as the sun climbed over Boston, I wound the clocks one by one. Each tick felt like a promise. each chime like a warning. And when the realtor rang my doorbell on Tuesday, clipboard in hand, I was ready. The realtor's heels clicked across my hardwood floor like a metronome. Sharp, precise, irritatingly steady. She was younger than I expected, mid-30s maybe, with a smile too white to be anything but practiced. Her clipboard was clutched like a shield. "Beautiful home, Mr. Harris," she said, eyes already skimming the crown molding. So much character. I stood by the mantel, arms crossed. "It's not for sale." Daniel jumped in quickly. "We're just having her take a look. No decisions yet." Ah, the realtor gave me that sympathetic smile people wear when they've decided you're the crazy uncle at Thanksgiving. She opened a cabinet, glanced at the fireplace, ran her fingers along the banister. "Original woodwork," she murmured. "Buyers will love that." I wanted to snap that I wasn't staging my life for buyers. But instead, I just nodded and let her walk the rooms. Better to let her underestimate me, too. When she passed the basement door, I stepped in front of it. "Workshop," I said simply. She tilted her head. "May I?" "No," I said. "That's mine." Her eyebrows arched, but she moved on. Daniel's jaw tightened. He hated that I still had boundaries he couldn't cross. After she left, Daniel lingered in the kitchen, arms folded. "Dad, you embarrassed me." I poured myself tea. "Did I?" "Yes. You can't just block people from seeing parts of the house. That's not how this works." "It's how it works for me," I said. His hands flexed against his arms. He was trying to hold something back. Finally, he said, "You're being unreasonable." "And you," I said softly, "are being greedy." That shut him up. For a second, the boy I raised peeked out in his eyes, wounded, uncertain. But then the mask snapped back into place, and he left without another word. That night, I opened the chest in the workshop again. I pulled out one of the deeds and placed it flat on the workbench, lit by the lamp. The paper smelled of age, but the ink was sharp, unyielding. Proof. A property in Quincy, bought cheap when I was still doing steady repairs for the banks. I'd rented it for years under a manager who thought I'd sold it long ago. Daniel had no idea it existed. Neither did Claire. I drafted a letter to Mr. Hathaway at the bank, authorizing a transfer of rental income into an account Daniel couldn't touch. Each stroke of the pen felt like a tick of a clock. Steady, irreversible. 2 days later, Lily came by after school. She tossed her backpack onto the couch and whispered, "They're mad, Grandpa. Mom said you're being difficult." Dad just keeps sighing a lot. I smiled faintly. "Good. Let them stew." She perched on the stool in the workshop while I polished a brass pendulum. "So, what's next?" I looked at her, 14, but already caught in the storm of adult schemes. She deserved better. But I couldn't shield her completely, so instead I gave her honesty. "What's next," I said, "is showing them that a clock only runs if every part agrees. And I'm not agreeing." She grinned, eyes bright. "You're kind of a badass, Grandpa." I laughed, the sound echoing in the room full of clocks. "Don't tell your parents." Saturday came, and with it another intrusion. Claire showed up with a binder under her arm. She spread it on the kitchen table. Budgets, lists, glossy printouts. "These are the numbers," she said crisply. "Do you realize how much equity is sitting in this house? It's irresponsible not to use it. You could live comfortably, travel, have everything taken care of." I leafed through the binder without expression. Numbers on paper, illusions of control. Finally, I closed it. "Claire, do you know what happens when you wind a clock too tight?" She frowned. "What?" "It snaps." She glared at me, lips thinning. "You're making this harder than it has to be." "No," I said softly. "You are." She slammed the binder shut and stormed out. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I left the workshop at midnight and walked the quiet Boston streets. The air smelled of salt from the harbor, the sidewalks slick with leftover snow. Streetlights buzzed overhead, and the city seemed to pulse like a living thing. I ended up outside an old church where the bells still chimed every hour. I leaned against the iron railing and listened. When the bells struck 12, the sound rolled through me, steady and defiant. Time was on my side. I just had to keep winding. When I returned home, I went straight to the storage chest. I pulled out another envelope, this one addressed to Daniel. Inside was a single line I'd written weeks ago in my neatest script. "A house is only yours when you respect the one who built it." I sealed it again, slid it into a hidden drawer of the grandfather clock in the hall. He wouldn't find it until I wanted him to. The next day, I got a call. It was Mrs. Alvarez from the clerk's office. "Richard," she said gently, "I've looked into what you asked. Your son can't sell without your signature, not legally. He'd need power of attorney, and he doesn't have it." I thanked her, hung up, and sat in my workshop smiling. Daniel thought he had me cornered, but the truth was, he'd been trying to move the hands of the clock without holding the key. And soon, he'd realize it. I woke to the sound of voices in the kitchen. It was early, earlier than Daniel ever liked to be up. I pulled on my robe and shuffled down the stairs, slow on purpose, so they'd think I was weaker than I am. Daniel and Claire were seated at the table, coffee mugs in hand, papers spread out like a war map. They stopped talking the second I appeared. That silence told me everything. "Morning, Dad," Daniel said quickly, too quickly. "Early for you," I said, filling the kettle. Claire smiled that sharp little smile of hers. "We wanted to catch you before your day got going." "My day doesn't go anywhere," I said. "That's the beauty of retirement." Daniel cleared his throat. "Dad, we've been patient. But we can't drag this out forever. The realtor says the market is strong now. If we wait, you'll lose money. We'll lose money." Ah. The truth finally slipped out in that little word. We. "Interesting," I said, turning with my mug in hand. "I didn't know my house was part of your portfolio." Daniel's jaw tightened. Claire laid her hand over his, a rehearsed gesture, and said, "We're just thinking about stability. For you, for us. Don't you want Lily to have a future?" That was her play, using Lily's name like a pawn. My blood burned. "You leave Lily out of this," I said, voice quiet but sharp. "Her future isn't built on selling what I've made." Claire's smile faltered. Daniel opened his mouth, but I cut him off. "You've been talking about this house like it's yours to move. It isn't, and it won't be." The kettle whistled then, shrill and sudden. I poured the water and let the silence do my work. Later that afternoon, I went down to the workshop and opened one of the clocks. Inside, folded neat as a watch spring, I slipped in another envelope, this one containing a copy of the Quincy deed. Not the original, but enough to prove its existence. I placed it carefully behind the pendulum, a secret waiting to be revealed when the right hand reached for it. This was the part of the game I liked best, setting traps in plain sight. Daniel thought I was too old, too slow. He didn't realize I'd been hiding things in clocks longer than he'd been alive. That evening, Lily came by again. She was pale, eyes wide. "Grandpa, Dad's angry. He and Mom were fighting about you." "About me?" "Yeah. Mom said you're being manipulative. Dad said you're stubborn." She hesitated. "He also said something about Lawyers. Ah, so the hour hand was moving faster now. I sat her down, gave her a glass of milk. "Lily," I said softly, "you need to know something. Your parents are going to push harder. They'll use words like responsible and safe. They'll say it's about love, but it isn't. It's about control." Her lip trembled. "So, what do we do?" I leaned close. "We wait. We let them think they're ahead, and when the clock strikes, we show them they never were." She nodded, braver than most grown men I've known. 2 days later, Daniel came by alone. He didn't sit this time. He stood in the kitchen, looming like a man trying to cast a shadow over me. "Dad, I've spoken with an attorney." I looked up from my tea. "Have you now?" "Yes. There are options. If you're not capable of managing things, we can arrange power of attorney. It's not ideal, but it might be necessary." I let the words hang in the air. This was it. The open threat. "Capable," I repeated slowly. "Do I look incapable to you, Daniel?" He hesitated. For a flicker, I saw the boy he used to be, the one who fumbled the mantel clock and cried when he broke it. But then he shook his head, steel in his voice. "You're not thinking clearly." I set down my cup and smiled faintly. "Do you know what happens when a pendulum stops swinging?" He frowned. "What?" "The whole clock dies." I leaned back. "Be careful you don't stop the wrong pendulum." He didn't answer. He just left, slamming the door behind him. That night, I made another trip to the storage unit. This time, I didn't just check the boxes. I carried out the safe. Heavy, awkward, but I managed. I hauled it into the workshop and set it against the wall, tucked behind an old cabinet. Inside that safe were records no lawyer could erase. Bank accounts, savings bonds, even copies of letters my late wife had written me, speaking of this house as our forever home. If Daniel tried to argue I wasn't capable, those letters would sing the truth louder than any attorney. The following Sunday, Claire invited herself to tea. She wore pearls this time, the full costume of respectability. "Richard," she said smoothly, "we don't want conflict. We want peace. But you're forcing our hand. This house, it's too much. It's time." I stirred my tea, watching the spoon swirl. "Whose time? Yours or mine?" Her smile twitched. "We'll see." That was when I leaned forward, just enough to let her see the steel in my eyes. "Claire, I've been measuring time my entire life. Don't think for a moment I don't know how much of it I have left, or how to use it." For the first time, I saw fear flicker in her. Just a spark, but enough. That night, I wrote another letter to Lily. This one I slipped into her backpack when she wasn't looking. If they press too hard, remember, clocks can't run without their regulator, and regulators aren't easy to replace. The letter came on a Tuesday. White envelope, neat typewritten address, no return name. I knew what it was before I opened it. "Notice of intent," the letterhead read. "An attorney's office. Words about guardianship petitions, capacity evaluations, and ensuring safety." I set the paper down on the table and stared at it. It wasn't a surprise. Daniel had tipped his hand days ago. But seeing the words in black and white still struck like a hammer on glass. Guardianship. They were going to try to declare me unfit. Take my name off my own life. I laughed then. Short. Bitter. They thought time had worn me down. They thought my mind had slipped. If only they knew how sharp every gear was still turning. That night, Lily found me in the workshop, the letter on the bench beside me. She picked it up, brows furrowed. "What is this?" "It's your parents' way of saying they've run out of patience." Her hands shook as she held it. They can't do this, can they? I leaned back, the ticking of the clocks filling the silence. They can try, but trying and succeeding are different things. I reached into the safe and pulled out a folder. Inside were bank records, property deeds, letters written by my wife years ago, proof of capacity, proof of intent, proof that I was not a man adrift. I slid the folder across the bench to Lily. Someday, when you're older, you'll understand why I kept these separate. For now, just know, I am not defenseless. She hugged me then, fiercely, like she was trying to anchor me to the world. 2 days later, Daniel arrived with a stranger in tow, a man in a gray suit, briefcase in hand, hair slicked back like a politician. "Dad, this is Mr. Carver," Daniel said, voice too casual. "He's here to help us understand options for the future." Mr. Carver smiled that oily lawyer smile. "Mr. Harris, a pleasure. I hear you've built quite a life here. Must be hard managing it all alone these days." I stood in the doorway, blocking his path. "I manage fine." He gave a small chuckle, like he was humoring a child. "Of course, but these things can get overwhelming. It might be time to consider support, legal, financial." I didn't move, didn't invite him in. "Funny thing about clocks," I said. "They don't work if you mess with their balance. Push too hard, and the pendulum stops." Mr. Carver blinked, clearly not following. Daniel flushed. "Dad, please, just hear him out." "No," I said firmly. "This is my house, and in my house, I decide who crosses the threshold. He doesn't." The lawyer's smile faltered. He muttered something about rescheduling, then retreated to the car. Daniel's face darkened. "Why are you making this so hard?" he hissed. "Because it's mine," I said quietly. "And because you're forgetting who wound the first clocks in this family." He left without another word. That night, I took the original Quincy deed out of the chest. I slid it into an envelope addressed to Mr. Hathaway, my old banker friend, with instructions to file it in a safe deposit box under my granddaughter's name. Let Daniel try to claim I was incompetent after that. A man out of his mind doesn't place assets neatly in the next generation's hands. I walked to the mailbox under the Boston streetlight, breath clouding in the cold, and slid it inside. The letter fell with a finality that made my heart steady. The next Sunday dinner was a battlefield in disguise. Roast beef? Mashed potatoes? Lily's laughter trying to fill the silence. Claire wore pearls again, like armor. Daniel's jaw was set like stone. Halfway through the meal, Claire dabbed her lips and said, "Richard, we've spoken to a specialist, a doctor who can do a cognitive assessment. It's just a formality." I set down my fork. "I've built clocks more complicated than your assessment." Daniel sighed heavily. "Dad?" "No," I said, steel in my voice. "You don't get to measure my time. I do." Lily's hand found mine under the table. Her grip was tight, fierce. She was scared, but she was with me. After dinner, when they left, Lily lingered at the door. "Grandpa, they're not going to stop." "I know." "Then how will you stop them?" I led her to the workshop, opened the safe again, and showed her another stack of papers. Letters, proof of old clients, notes of thanks. Even a signed statement from the neighborhood association years back, praising my volunteer work keeping their clocks running. "These are all testimonies of who I am," I said. "Not a crazy old man, not incompetent, a craftsman, a regulator." Her eyes filled with tears. "They don't deserve you." I smiled sadly. "Maybe not, but you do." The clocks chimed 9. filling the workshop with overlapping echoes. I looked around at the brass faces, the swinging pendulums, the steady ticking, every one of them proof that time could be mastered if you respected it. Daniel and Claire thought they were running out the clock on me, but they hadn't realized yet. I was the one holding the key. The summons came in a manila envelope, heavier than the one before, stamped with the seal of Suffolk County Probate Court. They'd actually filed guardianship proceedings, capacity evaluation, hearing dates set. I ran my finger over the embossed seal, feeling the weight of it. For a moment, I let the fear settle in my chest. I'd seen enough men my age broken by papers like this. Not by bullets, not by illness, by ink and signatures. But fear is just a pendulum's first swing. Let it carry too far, and it comes back as resolve. I laid the papers on the bench in the workshop, surrounded by clocks. Their ticking filled the silence. 100 tiny affirmations. You're not done. You're not done. That night, Lily slipped in through the back door. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold, eyes darting like a fugitive's. She had her phone in her hand, screen lit with a text. She handed it to me. Dad says we'll have proof Grandpa isn't safe soon. Just be patient. I stared at the words. Proof. That was their angle. Grandpa, she whispered, they want a doctor to say you're losing it. Mom already has someone lined up. I smiled grimly. Then we'll give them a show. Her eyes widened. What do you mean? I patted her hand. Trust me, Lily. Sometimes you let the clock run slow until the moment you need it to strike. 2 days later, Daniel arrived with a woman in a neat gray skirt and wire-rimmed glasses. A neuropsychologist, he introduced her as Dr. Myers. She was kind-eyed, but clinical, clipboard in hand. Mr. Harris, she said gently, I've been asked to evaluate your capacity. Just some simple questions, memory tests. Daniel hovered behind her like a warden. I invited her into the parlor. We sat, sunlight slanting through the blinds. She asked about the date, the president, my address. I answered without hesitation. She asked me to recall 3 words. I repeated them back easily. Then she asked me to draw a clock. I almost laughed. Draw a clock? I said, raising a brow. Yes, sir, just a circle with numbers and set the hands to 10 past 11. I took the pencil, sketched a perfect circle, and drew 12 neat numerals, each precisely placed. Then I positioned the hands exactly at 10 past 11. Not a degree off. When I slid the paper back to her, her eyes widened slightly. That's remarkably precise. I smiled faintly. I've been drawing clocks longer than you've been breathing, Doctor. Daniel shifted, uneasy. When she left, he turned on me. You're playing games. No, I said calmly. I'm simply answering the questions. She's not going to be fooled forever. Neither am I murmured. He stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the picture frames. That night, I went back to the storage chest. I pulled out the letters from my wife, dated decades ago, each one mentioning the house, our home, our legacy, our forever place. I placed them in a folder with my medical checkups, prescriptions, proof of appointments, a paper trail of competence. Then I called Mrs. Alvarez at the clerk's office. File this with the court, I told her. Quietly. Of course, Richard, she said. They won't see it coming. Sunday dinner was no longer dinners. It was interrogations with food on the table. Claire's voice was honeyed poison. Richard, wouldn't you be happier with less to worry about? No stairs, no repairs. I worry less than you think, I replied. Daniel tried a softer approach this time. Dad, please. We're not trying to hurt you. We just want to take care of you. I looked at him across the roast chicken, at the son I'd once carried on my shoulders through Fenway Park, shouting for the Red Sox. That boy was gone, replaced by a man with numbers in his eyes. "Daniel," I said softly, "taking care of someone doesn't mean erasing them." His jaw worked, but no words came out. Later that week, Lily found me polishing a clock in the basement. "Grandpa," she whispered, "Mom said if the court sides with them, you won't have a choice." I wiped the brass face until it gleamed, catching my own reflection. "Then I'll make sure the court hears the truth first." I tapped the clock gently, set its pendulum swinging. "Do you hear that rhythm, Lily?" "Yeah. That's the sound of order, of proof, of things that can't be denied. I've got enough of that to drown their lies." She nodded, hope flickering in her eyes. The day of the evaluation's report, Daniel showed up smug, folder under his arm. He spread it on my kitchen table. "Dad," he said, "the doctor says you're competent, for now. But she notes concerning stubbornness and lack of willingness to plan responsibly. That's enough for us to argue." I picked up the folder, flipped through it. My neat clock drawing stared back at me from the page. Precise, undeniable. I closed it, slid it back. "Daniel, do you know what makes a clock stop?" He rolled his eyes. "Here we go again." "Friction," I said. "Too much pressure. Too much grinding between parts. That's what you and Claire are doing to this family. Grinding it down," he sneered. "We'll see what the judge thinks." I smiled thinly. "Yes, we will." That night, I sealed the folder of my wife's letters, my medical records, and Lily's quiet testimonies into an envelope. I addressed it to Judge O'Malley, a man whose own father's pocket watch I'd once repaired years ago. Sometimes the regulator just needs to move a fraction of a degree to change the whole rhythm, and I had just moved it. The courthouse smelled of dust and old paper, the kind of smell you can't scrub out no matter how many renovations they do. I'd been here decades ago to testify in a property dispute for a neighbor. Never thought I'd be back as the subject of one myself. Lily walked beside me, her small hand slipping into mine as we passed through the metal detectors. She wasn't supposed to be there, technically, but I asked her to come. Her parents thought she was at school. I wanted her to see this, to know that time is only stolen from you if you hand over the key. Daniel and Claire were already in the waiting area, dressed sharp as blades. Daniel avoided my eyes. Claire smiled that politician's smile, the kind that hides teeth. Their lawyer, Mr. Carver, stood with them, his briefcase like a weapon at his side. "Dad," Daniel said flatly. "Son," I replied. No other words. We both knew what was about to happen. Inside the courtroom, Judge O'Malley presided. Time had softened him, his hair thinner, his voice gravelly. But I recognized him instantly. Years ago, he'd brought me his father's pocket watch, desperate to have it ticking again before the funeral. I'd fixed it overnight. He hadn't forgotten. I saw it in the flicker of recognition when his eyes met mine. The hearing began. Mr. Carver laid out their case with all the polish of a salesman. Words like declining judgment, safety risks, responsible planning. He waved around the evaluation report, emphasizing the phrases stubborn and lack of willingness to plan. Claire dabbed her eyes at the right moments. Daniel sat rigid, nodding solemnly. Then it was my turn. "Mr. Harris," Judge O'Malley said, "you've heard the concerns. What do you say?" I stood slowly, every ache in my knees deliberate. I let them all think I was frail, until I spoke. "I say that clocks don't lie, Your Honor." and I've spent my life keeping them honest. If I were as broken as they claim, I wouldn't have spent the last 6 months balancing 20 clocks in my workshop to the second. I wouldn't have managed rental properties for 30 years without a missed payment. And I wouldn't be standing here today with records to prove it. I opened the folder. Inside were the deeds, the bank statements, the letters from my wife. I laid them out one by one, neat as gears on a bench. These are my assets, my management, my choices, not theirs. Mr. Carver objected, muttering about relevance. The judge silenced him with a look. Then came the letter I'd mailed weeks earlier. Judge O'Malley held it up. "This," he said, "arrived at my chambers. Documentation of Mr. Harris's ongoing competence, including signed statements and verified financial accounts. It speaks directly to his ability to manage his own affairs." Daniel's face drained of color. Claire's jaw went tight. "And," the judge added, glancing at me, "a letter from Mrs. Harris, written in her hand, declaring this house their forever home. A clear statement of intent. This court respects that." I saw Daniel's fists clench on the table. He hadn't known about the letters. Then Lily did something I hadn't expected. She stood up. Her voice trembled, but she spoke. "Your Honor," she said, "I live with my parents. I know what they say when Grandpa isn't there. They don't talk about helping him. They talk about selling the house, about money. Grandpa's the one who helps me. He's not the one who needs protection." The courtroom went still. The judge studied her, then nodded gently. "Thank you, young lady. That's enough." I wanted to weep. She was braver than anyone in that room. When it was over, Judge O'Malley leaned forward. "This court finds no grounds for guardianship. Mr. Harris is competent. He will continue to manage his own affairs. Petition denied." The gavel struck like a clock's chime, final and echoing. Daniel's shoulders slumped. Claire's mask cracked, fury seeping through. Mr. Carver gathered his briefcase quickly, muttering excuses. I sat down, exhaling a breath I'd been holding for months. Outside the courthouse, the winter air cut sharp against my face. Lily hugged me tight, whispering, "You did it." "No," I said softly. "We did it. You and me, together." Daniel emerged behind us, face pale, eyes hard. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. For a moment, I saw the boy he once was, lost, ashamed. But then Claire's hand latched onto his arm, steering him away, and whatever was left of that boy disappeared. That night, back in my workshop, I wound every clock until the house pulsed with rhythm. Tick, tick, tick. A victory march. I sat at the bench, pen in hand, and wrote Lily another letter. Sometimes, the world tries to silence you with paper, but ink can defend as well as attack. Today, time was on our side. Tomorrow, it will be yours. I folded it, sealed it, and slipped it into the old grandfather clock in the hall. For the first time in months, I slept without fear. For weeks after the hearing, the house felt different. Not lighter exactly. The air was still thick with history, with memory, but steadier. Like a clock after a long adjustment, ticking smoothly again. Daniel and Claire stopped visiting for a while. Their silence was its own kind of message. Maybe they were nursing their pride, or maybe they were plotting the next scheme. I didn't know, and I didn't care. What mattered was that the law had spoken. I was not a man to be erased. Lily came almost every day after school. She'd sit in the workshop, legs swinging off a stool, asking questions about the clocks. How escapements worked, why pendulums needed weights, why some clocks ticked fast and others slow. Every clock has its own rhythm, I told her one afternoon, handing her a magnifier. Your job isn't to force it into something it's not. It's to listen, to find the beat it already has and honor it. She peered at the tiny gears through the glass, brow furrowed in concentration. Kind of like people, huh? I smiled. Exactly like people. One evening, there was a knock at the door. Daniel. Alone. He looked older than he had a month ago, shoulders sagging under a weight he couldn't shift. "Dad," he said, voice rough. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. We sat in the parlor, the ticking of the hall clock between us. He didn't look at me at first. He just stared at the floor, jaw working. Finally, he said, "I thought I was doing the right thing. For Lily. For us." "No," I said softly. "You thought you were doing the easy thing. There's a difference." His eyes lifted, watery but stubborn. "I don't want to fight anymore." I nodded slowly. "Then stop fighting. Respect the house. Respect the life built here. That's all I've ever asked." He swallowed hard, then left. No promises, no apologies, just a crack in the armor. Enough to tell me maybe the boy I raised wasn't completely gone. Claire never came. Her silence was louder than Daniel's words. That was fine. A clock doesn't need every part forever. Sometimes broken gears are left behind. Winter bled into spring. Snow melted from the gutters. Crocuses pushed through the soil in the yard. Lily came by with notebooks, her science project spread across the bench. "Grandpa, can I do it on clocks? Please?" I laughed, a sound that felt freer than it had in months. "Of course you can, but you'll have to build one yourself. No shortcuts." She groaned dramatically, then grinned. "Deal." We spent hours cutting wood, balancing weights, adjusting springs. Her fingers fumbled at first, but she learned. She listened. She grew steady. When the clock finally ticked on its own, she gasped. "I did it!" I ruffled her hair. "No, we did it. Clocks, like people, are never built alone." One night, unable to sleep, I wandered the house. The hall clock stood tall, pendulum swinging, steady and sure. I opened the hidden compartment and pulled out one of the letters I'd tucked away months ago. The one addressed to Lily. I unfolded it, read the words by lamplight. "One day, this house will be yours, not because it was handed to you, but because you honored it, because you listened when others tried to silence the tick. Keep it alive, keep it honest, keep it yours." I sealed it again and slid it back inside. Not yet. She'd find it when she was ready. As the weeks rolled by, the clocks in the workshop multiplied. Word spread again. Neighbors, friends of friends, all bringing me broken timepieces. Each one I repaired carefully, slowly, with Lily often at my side. I realized then that I hadn't just defended my house. I'd defended my purpose, my rhythm. Daniel and Claire? Maybe they'd try again someday, but I had no fear. I had time, and time was mine to keep. On a rainy Sunday, Lily asked me, "Grandpa, what happens when you're gone? Who winds the clocks?" I looked at her, the lamplight catching her earnest face. "You do. Or maybe your children? Or maybe nobody. Clocks stop when they're not wound. But that doesn't erase the hours they've kept." She thought about that, chewing her lip. Then she said, "I'll keep them wound. I promise." And for the first time, I believed her. That night, I sat in my workshop alone. Dozens of clocks ticked together, their sounds overlapping into something like music, a symphony of persistence. I closed my eyes, listening. Each tick was a heartbeat, each chime a memory, each pendulum a promise. They had tried to strip me of time, to silence me with paper and plans. But I was still here. I was still ticking. And as long as one clock in this house still swung, so would I.